Do you know of a great, immortal giantess who rides a wolf through the night sky and brings with her the cold and snow? She who can summon storms at will and command the lochs and rivers to flood the earth. She who herds deer, fights against the springtime, and freezes the ground with one firm stomp of her infinite staff. The divine hag who created the very landscape of Scotland with huge boulders and an enormous hammer. She is the mother of all Scotland. She is to be both respected and feared. She is the Cailleach. In Scottish Gaelic, the word Cailleach means old woman or hag, and it is derived from the word Cailleach, which means veiled one. And full disclosure, I don't know fucking anything about Gaelic. I am like the worst Scottish person in the world, unfortunately. This pronunciation, butchering it. Don't trust a word that comes out my mouth, just being honest. But what I do know is that the symbolism of veils is vast and varies greatly from culture to culture and place to place. But some symbolism that I find particularly interesting that kind of directly relates to the Cailleach is the representation of veils meaning spiritual connection, deep knowledge and divine psychic abilities. You'll often hear people speaking about the veil between worlds, which is kind of like the covering that shields this physical realm from the spiritual realm. This is the idea that both of these places exist simultaneously, but there's this like veil or covering that kind of hides them from the other. Veils are also symbolic of transformation. If you kind of think of like the lifting of a veil as the snake shedding its skin so that it can be transformed into something new, or you can think of the caterpillar that goes into the cocoon, and the cocoon is kind of like its veil, and then when they are unveiled they're a beautiful butterfly. I'm a beautiful butterfly. The word hag is interesting because it does obviously have a lot of negative connotations, and when you think of somebody being called the word hag, the image that probably comes to mind is somebody old and somebody ugly. And I mean, you don't generally call somebody a hag and it's like a good thing. My mum calls me a hag all the time, which honestly I'm kind of okay with it. And the word hag is actually derived from a word that originally meant witch, and the two used to be kind of interchangeable with one another. When we think of the maiden, mother and crone archetypes, the hag is the crone. So basically the older, wiser and more knowledgeable version of the other two. She is someone who has lived and learned, and she's got this kind of wisdom and knowledge that she can share because she's been around for a bit. But because women have been demonised for simply just growing old and ageing, the word hag has become obviously a bit of an insult. But I would say, much like the word witch was an insult, I feel like that's kind of being reclaimed once again. So it's also time to reclaim the word hag. So who exactly is the Cailleach? Well, it's actually a kind of difficult question to answer because the true answer is it depends on who you ask. As with much folklore and mythology, who's to say? So there is the Cailleach, who is one deity or goddess in Scottish and Irish folklore, who crafted the entire landscape and controls the weather. If you've ever been to Scotland or Ireland, then you'll know that the weather that's her particular favourite is really shitty, cold, stormy weather. and she is thought to be this one great primordial being who is the mother of all the other Celtic gods and deities. They all derived from her, and she is the one, the Cailleach. And then others see the term Cailleach as kind of being an umbrella term, which refers to lots of different goddesses who fall under the kind of winter goddess theme, because there are loads of different stories of these kind of like haggard old women who bring with them the cold and the storms in the winter. And then there's me and you, mere mortals who can be considered to be a witch, a fearsome hag, a wise crone, a Cailleach. In Scottish folklore, the Cailleach is often called just Cailleach, or she's sometimes known as Beira, Queen of Winter. So she is a primordial being and is said to have been the creator of all other gods and deities within the Celtic Pantheon. This makes her the mother of all these gods and deities, and she's thought to be vastly more powerful than them all. Typically, she is depicted as a huge almighty giantess in the form of an old hag with wrinkled blue frost-bitten skin, silvery white hair that resembles long strands of ice, and she has one eye. Sometimes she's depicted as like a cyclops with just one eye in the centre of her face, but more often, and the version I like better, she's got one eye and the other eye is kind of been lost to the cold. It's kind of frozen the eyeball right out her head, unfortunately. I just think that's cooler. And one eye is often thought to be kind of symbolic of spiritual connection, psychic abilities, and these kind of like great magical powers. And of course, she wears a veil or a hood. The Cailleach is often credited with the creation of Scotland itself. Some say that she did so accidentally when great big rocks fell from her apron and kind of landed on what is now known as the Scottish Highlands. However, others believe that she purposely crafted the landscape of rolling hills and huge big mountains to be her stepping stones. In some variations of the tale, she is also accompanied by 8 lesser hags who, as her servants, helped to create the land and the lochs. In one story, the Cailleach fell asleep on top of Ben Cruachan, and because she fell into such a deep sleep, the well that she had been tending to started to overflow, and this created a river which created Loch Awe, and that's the very first loch that was ever created in Scotland by complete accident. Deer are her loyal familiars, and she's often depicted as to herding deer and tending to them, but she's also strongly associated with wolves, as it says that she would ride a giant wolf through the night's sky from Ben Nevis, travelling all through Scotland to bring about the winter. And interestingly, January leading into February is known as the Wolf Month, and it's a cool little connection. The Corryvreckan Whirlpool, also known as Cauldron of the Plaid, is situated between the islands of Jura and Scarborough, and is said to be where the Cailleach washes her brown plaid. And she does this every single year, and for the 3 days that she does this, the roar of the whirlpool can be heard for as far as 20 miles away. Once she has washed her brown plaid and it is now a glistening white, she lays it over the top of Scotland as a blanket of snow, and this calls to the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. And just to ensure that this will definitely be a time of darkness and lifelessness, She takes her huge staff and she stomps it into the ground, and everywhere she stomps is completely frozen over. In some mythology, she was this wretched witch who just loved the harsh cold, the dark days, and the gloomy skies. So she fought tirelessly against the springtime and against any signs of winter ever coming to an end. One of the most popular stories of this is where the Cailleach captures a beautiful young maiden by the name of Brigid, who she was extremely jealous of. And if you know anything about gods and deities, they're literally all such a jealous bunch. They're all very toxic, very jealous, hate anyone perceived as more beautiful. They're honestly just like us. But I do think of this as less than like, oh, Brigid was so beautiful, so it means that the Cailleach just hated her because she was gorgeous. But it's kind of more what she represented that she kind of hated, I guess. She represents youth, life, warmth, springtime, and everything that is so opposed to the Cailleach. Because in order for springtime to rule, winter must die. So the Cailleach knows that if Brigid were to become more popular, then it would ultimately end in her own demise. Brigid is also synonymous with the Irish goddess Brigid, who is a goddess of spring, fertility, healers, poetry, and a lot of beautiful things. She's like a very widely worshipped deity and well-loved deity of Celtic mythology. And some consider Beira and Brigid to be like the exact same deity, and some consider them to just be very, very similar, but like different, like separate deities. So the Cailleach would give Brigid all of these impossible tasks to complete, one of which was to wash this brown fleece and to make it white. So Brigid washed this fleece over and over and over again, but it just forever stayed brown. So one day when she was feeling completely defeated and she was like almost ready to give up, this old man came across her and told her, "Do not worry, child." So he took the fleece from her, shook it 3 times, and the brown transformed into a beautiful, glistening snow white. Amazed, Brigid asked him who he was, and he replied that he was the king of winter and that his gifts did not stop there. So it was then that he handed her a little handful of snowdrops and told her that when she returned to the Cailleach to pass them on to her. So Brigid returned with the white fleece and with the snowdrops, placing them into the hand of the Cailleach, and when they touched her skin, the frozen blue hue got a few shades lighter, and the Cailleach started to feel just a few degrees warmer. And immediately the Cailleach knew that this was a message from the King of Winter, prophesying that her and her reign of winterous terror would soon be over. While this was happening, the Cailleach's own son, Angus, god of summer, was on the west coast of Scotland, dreaming of Brigid, who he was to marry. In this dream, which was kind of more like a vision, he saw that she was being held captive by his mother, and when he woke up, he vowed to save his future bride. However, Angus was warned by his father not to venture off until after the wolf month had passed, because the weather in the depths of winter would be far too treacherous for him to travel in. But Angus couldn't wait another moment, knowing that his future queen was enslaved. So he borrowed 3 days from August so that he could calm the seas and ease the weather so that he could go and save her. I'm actually getting married in February, And I'm wondering if there's any possible way that I could borrow 3 days from August. I'll be honest, I stay in Glasgow and August weather isn't always all that great. If you're lucky, it will be dry-ish, but you know, I feel like it might be potentially better than February weather. So if I can kind of like spin some kind of deal with Angus here, if you're watching, emails in the description. When Angus got to Bridie, a battle ensued between the two of them and the Cailleach, and this fight between them was long and gradual and lasted many, many weeks. But ultimately the Cailleach lost the fight, winter was over and spring begun. Begun. And it's said that in this time the Cailleach turns to stone, but of course not forever, because if there is one thing that we can be sure of, it's that winter will always return. And there is still some superstition to this day about Bridie's Day or Brigid's Day, which falls on February 1st. And I actually didn't know this, so it was very interesting. I feel like this, like, I want to get more into Celtic mythology because my knowledge of it is like super limited. I'm definitely like a Greek mythology girly at heart, but I've been trying to get to know more local spirits and deities and stories and stuff, and I've gradually been doing it a little bit this year, but I definitely like want to get more into it. So anyway, February 1st is thought to be the day that the Cailleach gathers her firewood to last her through the winter, and it's said that if she plans on making winter particularly long and cold, she'll make sure that February 1st is bright and sunny so that she has more time to gather wood. So typically people know that if February 1st is like a beautiful day, then winter is going to be fucking hellish because the Cailleach is like ghetto bossing so that she can like ghetto boss her way through the winter. But if February 1st is dark and dreary, then it means that the Cailleach is already asleep, so the chances are that winter is going to be much more bearable. In other versions of the story, the Cailleach or Beira and Brigid or Brigid are all the same goddess aging in reverse. So in the winter months, she is the crone, bringing with her, you know, death and coldness. And then on February 1st, she travels to this mystical island thought to be the Isle of Skye, and drinks from the Well of Youth that transforms her from Beira into Brigid. And then she's in like her life-giving era. And then inevitably she will grow old again, becoming once again the winter hag, and this cycle of the seasons will continue. If you are a regular here on this channel, then you'll know that I fucking love stories that have the themes of like death and rebirth. They're just some of my favourite kind of folklore and mythology stories. And you'll also know that Persephone is one of my all-time favourite goddesses because of this duality she has, and there's always this kind of constant state of life, death, rebirth, and I just love how she can be like this warm, caring, life-giving, sunshine persona, and then she's also this kind of like colder, harsher, to be more feared kind of energy as well. And I just love when deities like represent that, so I really love this aspect of the Cailleach kind of being both. And I think in particular with the Cailleach, I really like love this theme and how it can relate to femininity and how we should be embracing our hag self or witch self or crone self, and like when that time of old age comes to us, it is a blessing that unfortunately not everybody is going to get to experience. The like archetype of the maiden is so revered in these stories and also in modern life, where aging is seen as this bad, almost repulsive thing. And once women are over a certain age, they're either like unimportant and like disregarded and not thought about at all, or they become feared, people are like disgusted in them, or even worse, we can become disgusted in ourselves seeing our aging bodies. And sometimes like we don't even know that we're doing it, and it's not even a conscious thing. It's just something that's been so ingrained in us with society that young is good and old is bad. And I'm even like thinking about like the parallels between the substance, if you've seen that, in the Cailleach, and I'm like, that's kind of like Brigid and Cailleach coded right there, where it's like one must be like resting and sleeping for the other one to be awake. And it's like, if you've not seen the substance, go watch it, because it's weird and creepy and kind of gives you like a lot to think about. But like in that, like Demi Moore's character is kind of just living for the moments where she gets to be the younger, hotter, better version of herself, and she almost like starts to like disregard herself like entirely when she's like in her older form, because she just wants to be like this beautiful, like youthful version of her. I don't know, and I think that's quite interesting, like when I was like looking up things about the Cailleach, and I think because the substance is, well, it's not really that fresh in my mind. I seen it probably about 2 months ago and I'm still like thinking about it. But I was like, oh my god, same. It's like one's like sleeping and resting and one's like out doing like their thing, and then like they need to like switch around. I don't know, maybe I'm chatting shit. Anyway, that took a turn. All I'm trying to say is aging is a little bit scary, but maybe if we look to cool stories like the Cailleach, we can be like, wow, she's a powerful bitch, and maybe I'll be a Cailleach too one day. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment, because that really pushes things out in the algorithm and it lets more people see this. And until next time, bye!